In a cynical time, speak to us words that root us in truth and wisdom. In a pessimistic age, speak to us words that bring healing and hope. In a narcissistic culture, speak to us words that transcend in time and place, calling us to love you, love neighbor, and love ourselves. Amen. As Molly mentioned, we're going to be reading from the book of Exodus today, chapter 3, verses 1 to 15. It comes from the Contemporary English Version, and this text is a Lenten lectionary reading for today in the Episcopal Church. One day, Moses was taking care of the sheep and goats of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. And Moses decided to lead them across the desert to Sinai, the holy mountain. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a burning bush. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but it was not burning up. "This is strange," he said to himself. "I'll go over and see why the bush isn't burning up." When the Lord saw Moses coming near the bush, he called him by name, and Moses answered, "Here I am." God replied, "Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals. The ground where you are standing is holy. I am the God who was worshipped by your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses was afraid to look at God, so he hid his face. The Lord said, "I have seen how my people are suffering as slaves in Egypt, and I have heard them beg for my help because of the way they are being mistreated. I feel sorry for them, and I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians. I will bring my people out of Egypt into a country where there is good land, rich with milk and honey. I will give them the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivitites, and Jebusites now live. My people have begged for my help, and I have seen how cruel the Egyptians are to them. Now go to the king. I am sending you to lead my people out of this country." But Moses said, "Who am I to go to the king to lead the people out of Egypt?" And God replied, "I will be with you, and you will know that I am the one who sent you when you worship me on the mountain after you have led my people out of Egypt." Moses answered, "I will tell the people of Israel that the God their ancestors worshipped has sent me to them. But what should I say if they ask me your name?" God said to Moses, "I am the eternal God. So tell them that the Lord, whose name is I Am, has sent you. This is my name forever, and it is the name that people must use from now on."
Last Sunday, the Beitul Nasir Mosque in Cumberland held a vigil in response to the mass shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand. The Reverend Stephanie Bates, who serves St. Andrew's United Church, and I attended. The first thing I noticed before I even went inside the building was a sign that reads, "Love for all, hatred for none." The vigil was simple and brief. When the speakers had made their statements and offered their condolences, the imam invited us all to pray. When the vigil ended, the women of the mosque invited Stephanie and I to tour their wing of the building. As we toured, we talked. Two things they said stood out for me. When we asked them how they tell their children about events like the shooting in Christchurch, they told us that their kids are getting used to it. One woman's younger brother, a boy about 10 years old, upon hearing the news, simply responded along the lines of, "Oh, it's happened again." like this was news he was used to hearing. He's 10 years old. Then one woman said to us how much it mattered that we showed up, all of us. That showing up at times like these matters. Her words convicted me because I gotta tell you, I don't often show up. I do other things like pray and post my thoughts on Facebook. And I talk with the people that I know in my own circle and in this community. I do all that. But when the shooting happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in the fall, and people were making a point of attending Shabbat services that weekend, I didn't show up. I thought I had good reasons. I wasn't invited, don't know anyone. I didn't want to intrude. And all that's true. Yet, upon hearing this woman's words last week, my reasons began to seem small. And now I wished I had chosen to push past my own discomfort and all my good reasons and simply show up in person and in solidarity. There is much injustice and pain in the world, and we are given ample opportunity to help make a difference. Just like Moses was given an opportunity to show up and help to deliver the Israelites out of bondage in Egypt. When we meet Moses in this morning's Exodus story, he is minding sheep when he finds himself on Mount Horeb, or Mount Sinai, as it is also known. In the ancient world, it was common for people to think of mountains as the dwelling places for the divine. Just as the Transfiguration story on Mount Sinai invited us to consider God's glory in ordinary moments and places, today's story of Moses and the burning bush reminds us that God's glory can work in ordinary people too. In this story, God calls an ordinary guy, even an unlikely guy considering his murderous past, named Moses. God addresses Moses from within a burning bush, and as Moses approaches, God tells him to take off his sandals. A few commentaries I consulted suggest that this gesture signifies something beyond reverence. Taking off our shoes lets us relax, get comfortable, and be more fully ourselves. So God is saying to Moses, with me here on this holy ground, you can feel more fully yourself. But instead of kicking off his shoes and getting comfortable, Moses hides his face in fear. For in those days, folks believed that looking directly at God was fatal. But God persists. God keeps talking from within that flaming bush and tells Moses that he has heard the cry of the Israelites enslaved in Egypt, and it's time to do something about it. Moses, God says, I am sending you to bring them out of Egypt. Moses is reluctant. He asks, who am I to carry out such a mission? God is not swayed and simply answers, Moses, I have chosen you, and now I am sending you. Now go and tell them that God sent you. It can feel daunting to attend to the pain that is unleashed in the world as a result of injustice and hatred. Just the place names fill us with emotion. Christ Church, Tree of Life, Orlando, the Bataclan, Sandy Hook, the Quebec Islamic Cultural Center, the Danforth, La Loche Community School, L'École Polytechnique. In the face of violent attacks on innocent people, we can become numb and feel powerless to act. And like Moses, we can wonder, who am I to make a difference? Year after year, we watch the horrifying reports of shootings, bombings, pedestrians being trampled over, and I suspect that we shut down a bit each time, just a bit more, so that we can carry on with our everyday lives. We find ways to look away, to distance ourselves from the horror and the pain. And that's understandable and at times even necessary for the sake of our own mental health. Yet, at the same time, something in us dies a little each time we look away, doesn't it? Each time we think that we're too small or insignificant to make a difference. Each time we numb out to protect ourselves from the pain. Each time we face the tragic and wonder to ourselves or out loud, who am I to do anything about it? Except that as we considered last week, the answer to who am I is that you are God's beloved one. We are God's beloved children. And this morning, God is telling you and me and Moses that when God calls us to act, God will help us. For God can and does empower people to overcome injustice. Ordinary people, unlikely people, people who feel unqualified or resigned or powerless or reluctant, just like Moses did. God calls us, God's beloved ones, to work for justice, not to earn anything, not to prove anything, but as a loving response to God's love for us. Love God, love yourself, and love others wholeheartedly. Only we don't all get divine messages from within a blazing bush. Sometimes we hear it on the evening news or in our prayer time. Our calls to action aren't always so dramatic, but they can feel just as daunting when we get present to them. A rabbinic interpretation of Micah 6:8 counsels us. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So what can we do? Keeping in mind that anything we do is not intended to earn God's love, not necessary to earn God's love, let's consider 3 things that we can do to help to overcome injustice. First, show up. When we hear news reports of tragic events, when lives are lost and people are left traumatized and in mourning, we can show up. Mourning is a public act. It's a chance to gather together and name the pain. We can commit to showing up in person together the next time tragedy strikes. Second, build relationships. It's harder to show up in the absence of relationship. When we don't know our neighbors of other faith traditions, it will be much harder to be present in a meaningful way when the troubles come. And they will come. So it's on us to move outside our comfort zones and build relationships across religious and racial lines. And like Moses, we will have God with us, empowering us to act with love. And third, work together. Now, working together is something that I see you excel at all the time, OUC. Our collaboration with the Interchurch Refugee Group is one example of showing up, building relationships, and working together for the sake of justice and love. This congregation is amazing when it comes to partnering with other social justice groups. And we partner to share God's goodness with the wider community. And this is wonderful because another way to ensure that we don't remain resigned and numb is to build on the good work that is already being done. We don't always have to start from scratch. Today after worship, the Outreach Committee will host a fair in the hall, and there you will have a chance to learn more about the community groups like the Interchurch Refugee Group that we as a church support. Who knows? Maybe you will be inspired to partner with one of them. However it is that God is helping you and calling you to overcome injustice, I pray that God gives you all you need to show up and keep showing up. I pray that your efforts are blessed and fruitful, and that injustice is indeed overcome in some small way because you said yes to God's call. Don't let the enormity of the world's problems make you feel powerless or prevent you from acting. You are God's beloved. And by showing up in response to that love, building relationships and working together, you can overcome injustice. Together we can overcome injustice. Friends, trust that as we say yes to God's call, God will empower us just as God empowered Moses. And finally, trust that one day injustice will be overcome and there will be love for all. May it be so. Amen.